Hey, everybody. It's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien, down in the comic book dungeon in the basement. I'm sure the sound is just fantastically wonderful with its echoiness and the buzzing of the furnace in the background. But what are you going to do? It seems like I can talk louder down here late at night. Hopefully that's true, and hopefully I'm not waking up people up. But this is my comic book countdown. 14 issues this past Wednesday. It's late Tuesday night, so I'll be getting more new comic books tomorrow. I actually read all of these by this past Friday, but I just couldn't carve out the time to sit down and talk about it at any time when I was wide awake and not distracted by other things. So here we are. And I've got a beer. I just bought a single beer, I think, a while ago at the store. It is Rip City Lager by Deschutes Brewery, which is in Bend, Oregon. And Rip City is a Portland Trailblazers, the Portland basketball team's expression. Rip City goes back, I guess, to an original announcer in the early days of the team. Occasionally people actually call Portland Rip City, but I think it's mostly just a basketball term. For a lager, that's not bad. I'm not a lager fan. I think it was just the name Rip City that made me grab it. It's okay. It's nice and cold. A lager is the warmer the lager gets, the worse it'll be. So it was, that beer did not clear out the throat. It was just a week for my new comic book reading. I read some good older comics, but I'll talk mostly about them in some other video, I suppose. But for some reason, I did not feel grumpy about it. There was enough comics that I enjoyed, and even the ones that were bad, I somehow got something out of the experience. There was a certain amount of dullness to some of the comics. My in at number 14, Power Pack, was a very dull read. And that was a surprise to me because the writer is Ryan North. And I've read almost everything in Ryan North's Squirrel Girl run with my daughter. A great book to read out loud with a kid, full of fun takes on the Marvel Universe in kind of a jokey way and its own quirky sense of humor. And I just didn't feel any of that in here. Maybe he was reaching for quirkiness and somehow ended up with dullness. There seemed to be just long stretches of the characters talking things over, but not really having a whole lot to talk over. So it felt like, get on with it already. We already got your point. Don't go on for 5 more panels about that particular issue. The art has its charms, but maybe the art and Ryan North aren't clicking together. Maybe he needs the right artist as his muse. On Squirrel Girl, he had some pretty fabulous sort of kids comics artists. And I love the original Power Pack and read some of that out loud with my daughter too. So I just had high hopes for this, and it really didn't go anywhere. I think it's on my pull list, so maybe I'll give it one more issue. But very surprised that I didn't like it that much. And also kind of a dull comic was Undiscovered Country. I've been talking about this all along every month, and I've been saying for quite a while now that I'm sticking with it, even though it's a comic that doesn't click with me as well as I would hope it would. A lot of my hopes are both because of the two writers and because I love wild and crazy science fiction ideas. And this is packed with those, but it somehow feels like a slog to read anyway. I'm caring less and less. And I really am seriously thinking about dropping it now, even though there's these crazy futuristic whales and sharks here. I'm kind of curious what the explanation behind them is. So it's mild curiosity, I guess, that keeps me going with this. And it doesn't have, although this is kind of a good panel there, it doesn't have art that wows me. So that kind of often when the art wows me, that can make up for the script. And even the coloring doesn't wow me as much as you would think, because it's Matthew Wilson, who I consider, or used to consider, one of my favorite colorists. So anyway, we'll see. I may drop it this time around, probably next issue, if the next issue bores me as much. It's hard to let go of just because of the science fiction mysteries that I want to know what the solution to them will eventually be. But there's almost too many mysteries and too many complications. Speaking of science fiction, I picked up this book at my second shop. My main shop, where I have my pull list, is a very small shop. I really enjoy going there every week, but they don't have a lot of extra stuff on the racks, or unusual stuff on the racks that I haven't, that unless I'm the one who ordered them. And so at the other shop, I saw this comic from Stonebot Comics, and I've had some good luck with one or two others that I picked up. The secondary shop seems to carry Stonebot a lot, and this was a first issue in science fiction, so I thought I'd give it a try. And it was fun enough, but it was nothing special. It felt very familiar from science fiction movies from the 80s and beyond, and lots of science fiction stories, with a ragtag group flying around the solar, not the solar system, the galaxy, and having adventures, in this case, getting involved in a gladiator fight that helps them pull off a little, what do you call it? A little score, a heist, I think. But, yeah, and the art was okay, but just not my thing, really. So I don't think I'll pick it up again, although it might depend on my mood. The best thing about it, though, was all this descriptions of the characters, which gave you kind of a backstory on this science fictional universe. Earth is lost. Our heroine is some kind of artificial human that was invented by some, great scientist of Earth times, and they're trying to find Earth, and there's humanity scattered about. So it all seems very interesting, but it's the backdrop to a more sort of pedestrian adventure story. And maybe I would click with it more, because even though it's issue 1, it's really the second of a series of miniseries, I guess. And maybe if I'd read the first one, I would have been more invested in what was going on. So I was mildly interested, mildly bored at the same time. Kind of the same with I Walk with Monsters, a great title, and written by Paul Cornell, who has done a lot of solid writing in the past for DC, and then kind of went on and did some other interesting projects at Dark Horse, has been less active in comics. I know that he is a science fiction novelist also, so he may have been busy in those fields, or maybe writing for Hollywood or something. I don't know. He's British. I think he's written for some Doctor Who. Has he written Doctor Who novels or Doctor Who scripts? I'm not sure. So anyway, I heard him on a podcast, I think it was Word Balloon, talking about this project and how he's working with one of the best artists ever and best artists in current comics. And so I was expecting, I'm going to skip that page just not to give stuff away. I was expecting to be super wowed, but I kind of found it to be kind of standard, middle-of-the-road indie comics artwork without a lot of pizzazz or excitement to it. There was occasionally a good panel, but most of the time it was kind of dull. You can see here everyone's just kind of facing straight on towards the camera, so to speak, and there's just not a lot of visual interesting stuff to go with. And I'm not too crazy about the colors either. So Paul Cornell raised my expectations too high in terms of the art. And the story is about some people, one of whom I guess can change into a monster, and one of whom is just his adventurous friend, I guess. And they go out and entrap serial killers and child molesters and kill them with this person's monster form, which could be a good idea, but I was expecting something much more fun. I was just expecting a lot more going on in this issue, and maybe the story that they've got here is a bit of a downer or something, or maybe I'm kind of tired of serial killers and that kind of shtick. But there's a lot of potential here, but not enough going on in this first issue to make me pick up another issue, I don't think, unless I hear great things about it later on. Another comic that was kind of dull for me, despite fantastic art, which is why it ranks higher than those other ones. I'm sorry, I haven't been saying the numbers of these things. So Power Pack was number 14. Undiscovered Country came in at 13. Machine Girl was number 12. I Walk with Monsters was number 10. And XRay Robot, love the title, love the art, hate the writing, or just bored to tears by the writing, came in at number 10. I'm sorry, I got the numbers all wrong. I Walk with Monsters was number 11. Anyway, this X-Ray Robot came in at number 10, and what should have been a fun time travel romp, which is also kind of a tired science fiction cliche, it just felt almost like the script was randomly made up as he was drawing, and with just the idea that he would end in a loop with the problem solved with a time loop, and that's indeed what happened. But I'm glad I got it because I enjoyed the visuals. I'm glad it was only a four issue miniseries. I hope that Allred teams up with. I need to get out my my 3D glasses. He's thrown in some 3D pinups in here, and I think there might have been some in the other issues too. I did like the clever touch of the end of the story being in dialogue balloons, where he says, what is it then? It's the end. Anyway, kind of, I hope he teams up with a writer with more of a skill for stories that dig deeper a little bit, even in a fun way. In at number 9 was The Creeps, which I always kind of look forward to The Creeps, and then it's the take on the old creepy and eerie magazine, and they really, as I've said before, they stick so tightly to that concept of the surprise ending, no matter how cheesy or forced it has to be by the last page. And there were some very fun ones in here, like the one I just showed you about vampires. This one, The Wizard of Vlunder, was kind of good. Although the ending came so quick, it wasn't there. I just wished for a little more detail. Stakes on a Train was a little less good. And then we got some more that came in that just got... the twist endings got progressively more forced, and some of the art was less stellar at the back, although it's not too bad. But so as I progressed through it, sometimes The Creeps really ranks up there as a really fun read for me. But this started out fun and got less fun as I went through it. So being an anthology, it kind of gets weighed down by my last impressions. So I put it at number 9. In at number 8 was Maestro, which ended, I think this is the end point. Is it? No, I'm not sure. To be concluded. So no, there's one more issue. It kind of went downhill from earlier issues. I just wasn't as excited about it. And right now I can't even remember why. It just seemed like... It seemed like a lot of undeserved kind of things happened for the Hulk, the Maestro Hulk, and there was a big jump in time, and he solved the problem by some scheme he came up with off stage, and then came back and solved his little problem, his little conflict with Hercules. And so there were some cool bits in here, but it was a little below par for what I was hoping for. But we'll see. The whole series could be saved by the nature of the final issue. And then we've got Batman Detective Comics. I've dropped this from my pull list. I dropped Batman because I just felt burnt out on too much Batman and too many plots in Batman stories that were too familiar to me as such a long-time reader of Batman comics. But, as I said in my previous review of Detective Comics, I said I will probably pick it up off the racks if the artist is still Bilquis Evely, and it was. I've been informed that she is indeed a she, and I definitely the writing in this issue was better than the previous issue, so maybe if Bilquis Evely keeps pulling me in, maybe eventually the Pete Tomasi story will start clicking for me, and I'll say, hey, I want to read this Batman. I enjoyed it, but it still was in the zone of being a little too familiar. There is, in the last page reveal, the return of a villain that I thought was kind of a fun thing, and I liked the way that villain had been appearing behind a mask for a while. So, yeah, pretty cool issue of Batman Detective Comics. So I put that at number 7. And I don't know, just a personal quirk to put at number 6, the final issue of Fantastic Four Antithesis. And I've just learned that this is the collection of these 4 issues is going to come out as a treasury-sized trade. They've been doing that with a few things, like Silver Surfer Black. And so I don't know. I've been pretty down on modern Neil Adams, but I just had fun with the wackiness of this as a kind of cosmic, goofy story. And so I might be tempted to double dip, although it's ridiculous that they charged $5 for these issues, $5 a piece. But I still, depending on my situation, when I see the trade, the treasury-sized edition, I might pick it up. And I kind of would have liked if Sue Storm, because I'm always hoping for stories where Sue Storm ends up saving the day and being the smart one. But it was kind of a neat twist that Ben Grimm kind of took the leadership position and came up with the solution to the problem, not just by saying it's clobbering time and being the strongest dude and the bravest, but also by using his brain a little bit. And so I thought that was kind of fun. So maybe however little Mark Waid added to this gave the right little nudge for me personally. I'm sure it's still too silly of a story for most people, but for me personally, gave Neil Adams' wackiness just a little bit of a nudge to make it more bearable and more fun to read. So, yeah, crazy Neil Adams. I really admire the guy. I mean, how many other people I'm not sure how old he is, but well over 70, are still doing some kind of really interesting work? There are other people, but a lot of people really do fade away at this point. And then in at number 5 was Justice League Dark. The conclusion, finally, we hope, of all the elements that have been building up for 28 issues. Ram V has done a very good job with it, and I'm trying to remember who the excellent artist was earlier on, but now they have another excellent artist. So Justice League Dark has always had great art, good, solid writing, really, really fun characters. So the story has its wrap-up, and then most of the story is kind of a coda or an epilogue, and then with a final page that lets us know that it's all going to be tying into some upcoming event called Endless Winter. So I'm not too interested in that, but I guess I'll probably be stuck with an issue of Justice League Dark that involves Endless Winter. I thought it was being canceled with this issue. So is it gonna... all of DC's titles will go away for 2 months in January and February, I believe. Will Justice League Dark come back after that? I really hope it does, with continuing with these great creators. Also a cool cover by another excellent artist. What's his name? Kyle Holtz. Yes, Kyle Holtz. did he illustrate a few interiors also? And he did some great stuff on Batman Detective Comics. So, and I look forward to seeing more at DC from, I can't pronounce his name, Amanke Nahulapan. This is the first time I've ever seen his artwork. Is the last 3 or 4 issues of Justice League Dark, and so I have a lot of worries about DC and the massive layoffs they've had, and they recently cut even more people. They don't have very many people left in their direct market distribution part of the company. There's these fears that they won't continue with the direct market, with the comic book shop market, the regular monthlies. I hope that's wrong, and I hope they realize what a bad business decision that would be. I may talk about that more in a Sleepy Vlog or something. But I also was alarmed. I heard someone say that there was, this is on some podcast with somewhat professional comic book journalists on it, rumors that DC will be slashing their rates to freelancers starting next year. That would be a really bad idea too. Because the great thing about DC has been their creative staff. Okay, here's a wild card. In at number 4 is the Invincible Iron Man Doom Quest. True Believers number 1. King in Black. Iron Man, Doctor Doom. Does Iron Man and Doctor Doom have something to do with the King in Black? I had no idea. This is actually a reprint of a comic that I thought I remembered really well. The Invincible Iron Man number 149. And it continues, I remember, in 150, which was a double-sized issue with Doom and Iron Man having this great adventure in the medieval era. And when this came out, I was in college. This is when I'd come back to comics, mostly because of Frank Miller, but I remember really loving this Iron Man that was plotted by David Michelinie and Bob Layton together, inked by Bob Layton, penciled by John Romita Jr. very early in his career. And I remember loving this art. And the art is much sort of smaller and less spectacular than I remember. And I remember thinking Bob Layton was such an amazing inker. And he's a strong inker, but I'm not blown away anymore. But the story had this kind of simple pacing logic to it. As it progressed, I really enjoyed it. I've got to dig up my Iron Man 150 now and read that. So this came in at number 4 for me. It was a bit unfair because of the nostalgia thing, in a sense, to include it in competition with these other books, but who cares? This is an unfair channel. In at number 3 was Scumbag number 2. And now it's confirmed that the art is going to be a different artist every issue. This artist was perfectly decent, but felt like kind of in the shadow of the artist in the first issue. I suppose since first issues sell so much more than second issues, etc., that you could afford the more expensive artist for the first issue, or maybe that's just my imagination. The story inches forward, but adds some interesting details and some intriguing details. Most of all, I don't know if it's a hallucination, but when our Scumbag character talks to his childhood self, who seems to know what's going to happen and is giving him instructions, which of course he totally doesn't understand and will no doubt not obey. I still get the vibe of kind of underground comics and the Furry Freak Brothers and that sort of thing from it. And even like Zippy in the original, before he went to mainstream in newspapers, Zippy the Pinhead kind of stories. He's almost, he's a self-interested, narcissistic and drug-addled, self-pleasing person, but he's also this kind of simplistic buffoon who doesn't understand what we understand as we watch him wander through the world. So it made me think of that. There was a lot of interesting stuff in a discussion between ComicKkrakk and LaRasa on ComicKkrakk's show this past Sunday, so I'll try to find a link to that, where they talked about this book, and it made me think about it more and how much I do not want it to develop some normal Hollywood arc of redemption or some other thing like that. I want it to be a pure black comedy. I don't want this guy to improve as a person or learn better. I just want to see him mess with the reality of the world that he's in more and more. Like an underground comic, where you just go in, create chaos, smash up everything, and say, that's all, folks. In at number 2 was this Usagi Yojimbo color reprint. I don't know where this comes in the history of Usagi's adventures or publication history, but it looks very solid. It was a good one and done first issue, playing up a very simple conceit about this lizard that is eating up food at this restaurant, and the restaurant owner who wants to kill it, and Usagi decides to save it, and hilarity ensues, and it was very satisfying. And I prefer Stan Sakai's current art style, but I definitely enjoyed this, and in my shallowness, I just like Usagi in color. It just makes sense to me that way. So that's great. I'm going to add this to my pull list. I have the regular Usagi, the new Usagi on my pull list, but I'm going to make sure this one's on it. And finally, in at number 1, great art for the win, good script, but I am just so totally in love with Tyler Crook's art in this Colonel Weird Cosmogogue. This is issue 2, and I enjoyed getting a lot of Colonel Weird's childhood, and I just love that moving around through time kind of feeling. It reminds me of one of my favorite books when I was a teenager, which was Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. It has that feeling to me, even though, of course, it doesn't involve Nazi Germany or anything like that. But, yeah, this is just a super pleasure. I hope it goes on for more than 4 issues, but I have a feeling most of these minis have been 4 issues from Dark Horse, so this probably will be too. And then after that, I can't wait to see what Tyler Crook, sorry. I think there's also a Tyler Crook. Can't wait to see what Tyler Crook does next after this. So, yeah, I just keep wanting to look at the art. Okay, so that's all of those books. And I don't know. I'm having a really good time talking about it. Not feeling grumpy about the comics I didn't like. Most of them had something of interest to me. And tomorrow I'm going to get some new comics. And maybe I'll get this countdown video out sooner and do a sleepy vlog and show you stuff I got from Kickstarter and elsewhere. Talk to you later.